Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to spend your life trying to be understood? You explain your intentions, clarify your words, defend your choices, and still, someone walks away with a completely different version of who you are. It feels unfair, it feels frustrating, and if you are not careful, it becomes a burden you carry every single day. But perhaps the burden is not that people misunderstand you. Perhaps the burden is believing they must understand you before you can live in peace. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must make a quiet decision. Will I spend my energy managing other people's opinions, or will I spend it mastering my own mind? These two paths can never be walked at the same time. One leads outward into endless conflict, where every criticism demands a response and every misunderstanding becomes a battle. The other leads inward, where peace is no longer dependent on applause, agreement, or recognition. Not everyone will understand your silence. Not everyone will understand your discipline. Some will mistake your kindness for weakness, your confidence for arrogance, and your distance for disrespect. Others will judge your decisions without ever knowing the battles you have fought in private. They will create stories about you because the human mind is uncomfortable with what it cannot fully explain. This has always been true, and it will always remain true. The strongest people are not those who convince everyone they are right. They are the ones who no longer feel the need to. They understand that truth does not become stronger because it is defended loudly. A mountain does not explain why it stands tall. The sun does not argue with the clouds that try to hide it. Nature teaches us a quiet lesson every day. What is real does not seek permission to exist. Every unnecessary explanation gives away a piece of your peace. Every attempt to force someone to see your heart places your happiness in hands that were never meant to hold it. There is immense freedom in realizing that your responsibility ends with your actions, not with other people's interpretations. You cannot control the stories they tell themselves, but you can control whether those stories disturb your spirit. Imagine living with the confidence that your character is built in silence, not in public opinion. Imagine walking forward without the weight of proving yourself to people who have already chosen their conclusions. This is not indifference. It is wisdom. It is the understanding that your energy is precious, your time is limited, and your peace is too valuable to trade for acceptance. Today, we will explore why being misunderstood is not a weakness, but a hidden opportunity. We will discover how silence can become strength, how restraint can become power, and why the greatest form of confidence is the ability to let people think whatever they choose while you remain unwavering in your purpose. Because the moment you stop chasing understanding from the world is the moment you begin to truly understand yourself. The desire to be understood is deeply human. From the moment we begin interacting with the world, we hope that others will see our intentions, appreciate our efforts, and recognize the goodness we try to bring into our actions. There is nothing wrong with wanting connection. The problem begins when our peace depends on it. When your happiness rises and falls with the opinions of others, you unknowingly surrender control of your inner world. Instead of living according to your values, you begin living according to expectations that constantly change. This is how the need for approval quietly becomes a prison. Think about how many decisions people make each day based not on what feels right, but on what will be accepted. They hesitate to speak honestly because they fear rejection. They avoid pursuing meaningful goals because someone might criticize them. They remain in unhealthy relationships because they cannot bear being misunderstood. They wear masks that earn applause while hiding the parts of themselves that long to breathe freely. Slowly, without realizing it, they stop asking, "Is this true to who I am?" and begin asking, "Will people approve of this?" The second question is dangerous because it places your direction in the hands of people who are not living your life. Approval is temporary. The same people who celebrate you today may question you tomorrow. Those who praise your courage may later criticize the very choices they once admired. Public opinion moves like the wind. It changes direction without warning, And anyone who builds their identity upon it will constantly feel unstable. You cannot create lasting peace on a foundation that shifts every day. True stability comes from knowing that your values remain steady even when opinions around you do not. There is a subtle difference between listening to feedback and becoming dependent on approval. Feedback helps you grow because it invites reflection. Approval controls you because it demands obedience. One strengthens your character, while the other weakens your independence. A wise person is willing to learn from others, but they do not allow every voice to define their worth. They understand that not every opinion deserves equal space in their mind. Some opinions are informed by wisdom, while others are shaped by misunderstanding, projection, or personal insecurity. If you give every opinion the same authority, you will spend your entire life chasing an impossible standard. Consider how much energy is wasted trying to convince everyone that you are good enough. You explain your motives repeatedly, hoping someone will finally understand. You replay conversations in your mind, wondering how you could have sounded more convincing. You carry the weight of judgments that were never yours to carry. This constant mental struggle drains the very energy that could have been invested in becoming a stronger, kinder, and more disciplined person. The irony is that the more desperately you seek approval, the less authentic you become. People sense when someone is performing for acceptance instead of standing firmly in truth. Inner strength begins the moment you recognize that your worth cannot be measured by applause. Imagine a tree standing alone in a vast field. It does not ask the birds whether it deserves to grow. It does not seek permission from the wind before extending its branches toward the sky. It grows because growth is its nature. Storms may bend it, seasons may strip away its leaves, and harsh weather may test its roots, yet it continues its quiet work without asking for recognition. Human beings often forget this simple lesson. We spend so much time looking outward that we neglect the roots within ourselves. When you free yourself from the need for approval, your decisions become clearer. You stop chasing popularity and start pursuing integrity. You no longer measure success by how many people agree with you, but by whether your actions align with your principles. This shift creates remarkable peace because it removes the impossible responsibility of controlling how others perceive you. You begin to understand that people see the world through the lens of their own experiences, fears, and expectations. Their judgments often reveal more about their perspective than about your reality. This does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or dismissive of others. Humility remains essential. Compassion remains essential. Respect remains essential. But humility is not the same as dependency. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. Respect does not demand constant self-justification. You can listen carefully, treat others with kindness, and still walk your own path without seeking permission at every step. The greatest freedom arrives quietly. It is not announced with applause or celebrated by crowds. It is felt in the peaceful moments when criticism no longer shakes your identity, when praise no longer inflates your ego, and when your actions are guided by conscience instead of applause. In that freedom, you discover that the prison door was never locked by other people. It was locked by your own belief that their acceptance was necessary for your peace. The moment you release that belief, you begin to experience a strength that cannot be taken away, because it no longer depends on anyone outside yourself. One of the most difficult truths to accept is that no matter how honest your intentions are, someone will misunderstand them. You can speak with kindness and still be called harsh. You can act with humility and still be accused of seeking attention. You can give your best effort, remain loyal, and carry yourself with integrity, yet there will always be people who see only what their own perspective allows them to see. This reality is not a sign that you have failed. It is simply part of being human. Every meaningful life eventually encounters misunderstanding, and learning to accept this truth is one of the greatest forms of emotional maturity. Many people spend years trying to control how others perceive them. They carefully choose every word, constantly explain themselves, and replay conversations long after they have ended. They hope that if they are patient enough, clear enough, or kind enough, everyone will eventually understand their heart. But the truth is that understanding cannot be forced. It is a choice made by the other person, influenced by their experiences, beliefs, fears, and expectations. Two people can witness the same event and leave with completely different conclusions. This is not because one is necessarily right and the other wrong, but because every mind interprets reality through its own unique lens. Imagine looking at a mountain from different directions. One person sees a gentle slope covered in trees. Another sees sharp cliffs and rough stone. Both describe the same mountain, yet their perspectives are completely different. Human relationships work in much the same way. People rarely see your whole story. They only see the angle from which they are standing. They do not know your private struggles, your silent sacrifices, or the reasons behind every decision you make. They fill the missing pieces with assumptions, and those assumptions often become their version of the truth. This is why trying to satisfy every opinion becomes an endless struggle. Every time you convince one person, another may still misunderstand you. Every explanation creates another question. Every defense invites another judgment. You may eventually realize that your greatest exhaustion does not come from being misunderstood. It comes from believing that everyone must understand you before you can move forward. Throughout history, individuals who brought meaningful change were often misunderstood in their own time. Their ideas challenged comfort, their actions disrupted expectations, and their commitment to truth was mistaken for rebellion or pride. If they had stopped every step to gain universal approval, they would never have fulfilled their purpose. Progress often requires walking a path that others cannot yet understand. Sometimes people only recognize the value of your choices long after the results have become impossible to ignore. Misunderstanding also teaches humility. It reminds you that just as others may misunderstand you, you may also misunderstand them. This awareness softens the heart. Instead of reacting with anger, you begin to recognize that everyone is carrying invisible experiences that shape how they think and behave. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it encourages wisdom instead of resentment. You stop expecting perfect understanding from imperfect people because you realize that you are imperfect as well. There is great peace in accepting that your responsibility is to act with honesty, not to control every interpretation. You are responsible for your character, your words, and your actions. You are not responsible for the stories someone chooses to create after you have spoken. Once you have acted with sincerity and integrity, there is little more you can do. Holding on to the need for complete understanding only creates unnecessary suffering. When you become comfortable with being misunderstood, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to lose its influence over your decisions. You no longer avoid doing what is right simply because someone might judge you. You stop delaying your growth because you worry about criticism. Instead, your attention shifts from protecting your image to strengthening your character. This is a powerful transformation because character remains even when reputation changes. Life becomes lighter when you stop carrying the impossible burden of managing every opinion. You begin to realize that peace is found not in universal acceptance, but in inner alignment. If your actions are consistent with your deepest values, then misunderstanding no longer feels like a personal attack. It becomes another reminder that every person sees only a small part of the whole picture. This acceptance does not make you indifferent to others. You still communicate with kindness. You still listen with respect. You still apologize when you make mistakes and remain open to learning. But you no longer sacrifice your authenticity in exchange for temporary approval. You understand that the people who truly matter will come to know your character through time, consistency, and action rather than endless explanations. Those who are determined to misunderstand you would likely do so no matter how carefully you speak, because some minds seek confirmation of their assumptions more than they seek truth. Once you understand this, you stop chasing perfect perception and begin walking your path with quiet confidence, allowing your life itself to become the clearest expression of who you are. There is a quiet strength that few people ever develop, and it is the ability to remain silent when every emotion inside urges you to defend yourself. Most people believe that strength is found in having the perfect response, winning every argument, or proving every accusation wrong. But real strength often appears in the moments when you choose not to speak. It is the discipline to recognize that not every misunderstanding deserves an explanation, and not every opinion deserves your attention. Silence is not a sign of weakness. When chosen with wisdom, it becomes one of the greatest expressions of self-control. Think about how much energy is spent trying to convince people who have already made up their minds. You explain your intentions once, then again with different words, hoping that clarity will change their perspective. If they continue to doubt you, you explain even further. Before long, the conversation is no longer about truth. It becomes a battle for validation. The more you speak, the more you feel the need to justify every action, every decision, and every choice. This cycle has no end, because someone who is committed to misunderstanding, you will always find another reason to question your character. Silence interrupts this cycle. It is not the silence of avoidance or fear. It is the silence that comes from inner certainty. When you know who you are, you no longer feel the need to prove it in every conversation. You understand that your identity cannot be strengthened by winning an argument, nor can it be destroyed by losing one. Your character is built through consistent actions, not persuasive words. Nature offers countless examples of this truth. The strongest mountain never argues with the storm. It simply remains standing. The deepest river does not announce its depth with noise. It continues flowing with quiet confidence. The sun does not explain why it rises every morning. It simply fulfills its purpose. Strength does not seek constant recognition, because true strength has nothing to prove. Human beings often forget this lesson. We believe that speaking more will always solve the problem, when in reality, excessive explanation often weakens the message. There is a difference between communicating with sincerity and defending yourself endlessly. Honest communication builds understanding. Endless defense reveals attachment to other people's approval. Once you have spoken truthfully and respectfully, there comes a moment when continuing to argue no longer serves wisdom. At that point, silence becomes an act of dignity. It communicates that your peace is more valuable than being declared right. Many conflicts continue not because the truth is unclear, but because both sides are more interested in victory than understanding. Imagine two people pulling on opposite ends of a rope. As long as both continue pulling, the struggle remains. But the moment one person lets go, the tension disappears. Silence is often that decision to let go. It does not mean surrendering your principles. It means refusing to waste your energy on battles that cannot produce peace. This kind of silence requires discipline because the ego always wants the final word. The ego whispers that if you remain silent, people will think you are guilty, weak, or incapable of defending yourself. Yet wisdom asks a different question. Will speaking create greater understanding, or will it simply feed the conflict? If your words cannot bring clarity, they often become fuel for misunderstanding. Learning to recognize this difference is a mark of maturity. Your actions possess a power that words can never fully match. Anyone can make promises. Anyone can create convincing explanations. But consistent action speaks with undeniable authority. Over time, your habits reveal your character more clearly than any argument ever could. If you are patient enough to let your life become your message, you will discover that time has a remarkable way of exposing truth. Those who judge too quickly often find themselves reconsidering when they witness your consistency. Choosing silence also protects your inner world. Every unnecessary argument leaves behind emotional residue. You replay conversations, imagine better responses, and carry frustration long after the moment has passed. Your mind becomes occupied with people who may never understand you. This steals attention from the things that truly deserve your focus: your growth, your purpose, your relationships, and your peace. Silence creates space for your energy to return to where it belongs. This does not mean you should never speak. There are moments when truth must be expressed, boundaries must be established, and injustice must be challenged. Courage sometimes requires words, but courage also requires knowing when words have reached their limit. After you have spoken honestly, respectfully, and clearly, there is great wisdom in stepping back. You cannot force understanding into a closed mind. The strongest individuals are not those who answer every criticism. They are the ones who remain grounded regardless of criticism. They trust that integrity revealed through action will outlast opinions formed through assumption. They understand that every minute spent defending themselves is a minute taken away from becoming the person they aspire to be. Instead of chasing acceptance through endless explanation, they allow their discipline, kindness, consistency, and quiet confidence to become the evidence that no argument could ever provide, knowing that a life lived with integrity will always speak louder than 1,000 carefully chosen words. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Many people confuse it with becoming cold, distant, or uncaring, but true emotional detachment has nothing to do with losing compassion. It is the ability to remain steady without allowing every opinion, criticism, or emotional reaction from others to control your inner state. It is not about building walls around your heart. It is about building strength within it. When you develop this strength, you stop reacting to every situation impulsively and begin responding with wisdom. This quiet discipline is one of the greatest signs of inner power. Most suffering is not created by what happens to us. It is created by the meaning we attach to what happens. Someone ignores your message, and your mind immediately creates stories of rejection. Someone criticizes your work, and you begin questioning your worth. A stranger makes an unfair comment, and suddenly your entire day is consumed by anger or disappointment. These emotions feel automatic, but they are often habits that have been reinforced over many years. The mind becomes conditioned to react before it reflects. Emotional detachment begins by interrupting this pattern. Imagine your mind as a calm lake. When every opinion becomes a stone thrown into the water, the surface never settles. One person's praise creates excitement. Another person's criticism creates frustration. A misunderstanding creates anxiety. A compliment creates pride. Your peace rises and falls depending on what others say or do. But a deep lake remains calm even when stones disturb the surface because its depth is untouched. In the same way, a person with inner strength may experience emotions, but those emotions do not define their actions. Beneath temporary waves exists a steady foundation that cannot easily be shaken. This steadiness is developed through awareness. Before reacting, you begin asking yourself simple but powerful questions. Is this criticism actually true? If it is, what can I learn from it? If it is not, why should I carry it? Does this situation deserve my energy? Or am I giving importance to something that will not matter tomorrow? These questions create a small space between emotion and action, and within that space lies freedom. The person who can pause before reacting is far more powerful than the person who reacts without thinking. Life constantly presents situations that test your emotional balance. Someone may underestimate your abilities. A friend may disappoint you. A colleague may take credit for your work. A family member may fail to understand your intentions. If every disappointment immediately controls your mood, then your emotional state belongs to circumstances instead of yourself. Inner strength means reclaiming ownership of your mind. It means refusing to allow temporary events to determine your lasting peace. One of the greatest obstacles to emotional detachment is the ego. The ego wants recognition, agreement, admiration, and constant validation. It takes every disagreement personally because it believes its value depends on being accepted. But when you begin to see yourself clearly, the ego gradually loses its influence. You no longer need every person to approve of you because you understand that your worth is not decided by changing opinions. Confidence rooted in character is far more stable than confidence rooted in applause. Emotional detachment also transforms relationships. When you stop reacting impulsively, conflicts lose much of their power. Instead of answering anger with anger, you answer with calmness. Instead of allowing another person's frustration to become your frustration, you remain centered. This does not mean accepting disrespect or allowing others to mistreat you. Healthy boundaries remain essential. The difference is that your decisions are guided by clarity rather than emotional impulse. You respond because you choose to, not because your emotions force you to. There is great freedom in recognizing that you cannot control the emotions of others. Some people will always be upset. Some will misunderstand you despite your best efforts. Some will criticize you regardless of what you accomplish. Trying to manage every person's feelings is an impossible responsibility. Emotional detachment allows you to release this burden. You continue treating others with kindness and respect, but you no longer believe that your purpose is to satisfy every expectation placed upon you. Developing this kind of inner strength requires patience. It is not achieved in a single moment of inspiration, but through countless ordinary moments. Each time you choose understanding over impulse, you become stronger. Each time you refuse to let anger dictate your words, your discipline deepens. Each time you release resentment instead of holding on to it, your heart becomes lighter. Slowly, almost unnoticed, your reactions begin to change. Situations that once disturbed you lose their power because your attention is no longer controlled by external events. The strongest individuals are not those who never feel sadness, disappointment, or anger. They experience these emotions just as deeply as anyone else. The difference is that they do not become prisoners of them. They acknowledge their feelings without allowing those feelings to dominate their decisions. Their calmness is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. They understand that every emotional storm eventually passes, and there is no wisdom in making permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. By cultivating this quiet detachment, they create a life guided not by impulse, fear, or approval, but by clarity, purpose, and an unwavering commitment to the values that define who they truly are. There comes a moment in life when you realize that no matter how carefully you speak, how kindly you act, or how honestly you live, there will always be people who disagree with you. Some will question your choices, others will criticize your decisions, and a few may never truly understand who you are. At first, this realization can feel discouraging, but if you look deeper, it carries an extraordinary gift. It reminds you that your purpose is not to collect approval, but to live with integrity. The moment you stop measuring your worth through the opinions of others is the moment you begin to experience genuine freedom. Many people spend years chasing acceptance without realizing the cost. They adjust their personality to fit every room they enter. They silence their beliefs to avoid criticism. They delay important decisions because they fear disappointing someone. Gradually, they become strangers to themselves. They know exactly what everyone else expects, yet they no longer know what their own heart is asking of them. This is one of the greatest tragedies of modern life. A person can be admired by many while feeling disconnected from their own truth. Freedom begins when you understand that other people's opinions are reflections of their own experiences, not absolute definitions of your reality. Every person sees the world through the lens of their upbringing, beliefs, fears, successes, and disappointments. Two people can witness the same action and interpret it in completely different ways. One may see confidence where another sees arrogance. One may see discipline where another sees stubbornness. If opinions are shaped by personal perception, why should you allow them to determine your identity? This does not mean rejecting all advice or believing that you are always right. Wisdom requires humility. There will be times when criticism reveals a blind spot that helps you grow. There will be moments when honest feedback becomes one of your greatest teachers. The key is learning the difference between constructive guidance and the endless noise of judgment. Constructive guidance points you toward becoming better. Judgment often attempts to pull you away from your authentic path. A wise person listens carefully, reflects honestly, and then decides based on principles rather than pressure. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents an opinion you refuse to let go of. One person says you are not successful enough, so you carry that weight. Another questions your appearance, and you add another stone. Someone criticizes your dreams, your decisions, or your pace of progress, and the backpack becomes even heavier. Eventually, you are exhausted, not because life itself is impossible, but because you insist on carrying burdens that never belong to you. Freedom begins the moment you place that backpack on the ground and realize that you were never meant to carry everyone else's expectations. When you stop chasing approval, your energy returns to what truly matters. Instead of constantly looking outward, you begin looking inward. You invest in developing your character, strengthening your discipline, and deepening your understanding of yourself. You become less interested in proving your value and more interested in living it. This shift changes everything. Decisions become clearer because they are guided by purpose instead of popularity. Relationships become healthier because they are built on authenticity rather than performance. Your peace becomes more stable because it no longer depends on unpredictable applause. There is also a quiet confidence that grows within you when you embrace this freedom. It is not loud or arrogant. It does not seek attention or demand recognition. It simply knows where it stands. Like a tree with deep roots, it remains steady even when strong winds arrive. People may misunderstand you. They may criticize you. They may even walk away. Yet your sense of self remains grounded because it is rooted in values rather than validation. This confidence cannot be borrowed from compliments, and it cannot be destroyed by criticism. One of the greatest signs of maturity is learning to let people have their opinions without feeling compelled to change them. You begin to understand that not every disagreement requires a debate. Not every false assumption needs correction. Sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is allowing people to think what they choose while you continue walking your path with dignity. Time has a remarkable way of revealing truth. Consistent actions speak more clearly than endless explanations ever could. Living according to your values also requires courage, because values often demand choices that are uncomfortable. Integrity may require saying no when everyone expects yes. Discipline may require remaining focused while others seek distraction. Kindness may require forgiving someone who never apologizes. Patience may require trusting a process that no one else understands. These choices may not always earn applause, but they build something far more valuable than approval. They build character. At the end of life, the opinions that once seemed so important will fade into silence. What will remain is the person you became through the choices you made each day. You will not remember every compliment or every criticism, but you will remember whether you lived honestly, whether you stayed faithful to your principles, and whether you had the courage to remain true to yourself, even when the world expected something different. That is the freedom few people ever discover, because it requires letting go of the impossible task of controlling how others see you and embracing the far more meaningful responsibility of becoming the person your conscience knows you are meant to be